stop stealing things from. You know, they have the Congo. In our lab up in Vancouver, there's a picture of this kid digging in the muck of the Ituri rainforest. I used to work there a long time. In the Ituri rainforest in the northeast Congo, it's a pygmy tribal area, and these kids are, you know, teenagers. They're digging around in the muck to get what? A photograph of them in my article. Digging for coal tran. Anybody ever hear of coal tran? Hello? Somebody say that yes or no? Okay, coal tran is a rare earth. It's in every single phone in your pocket. It's a very crucial little mineral that's necessary for iPhones and all kinds of electronic, specialist electronic devices. Okay? And it comes from the mud in the Ituri rainforest of the eastern Congo. Okay. But the cost of that is hideous. It's just hideous. Not just ripping up the mud and destroying the Ituri rainforest and the habitat of the pygmies and all of the beautiful animals and whatnot around there, but rape and pillage and enslavement. That's what's going on there. It's really horrific. I have a quote from a guy in my group, a concrete journalist, in my paper that you should read about what it's done to kids there. It's hideous. Okay. So we need to stop that. If we stop that, the Congo is arguably the richest country in the world in terms of natural resources. People in the Congo have to eat every other day. And it's shocking. It's just shocking. In Kinshasa, the capital of the Congo, they have a term for it. It's called délestage. Anyone here speak French? What's délestage mean? Okay. What it's used for in the Congo means skipping a day. What happens is the power plants break down. Okay, they don't have enough electricity generation to go over the whole town of Kinshasa. So one neighborhood is blacked out for a bit, and then another neighborhood is blacked out for a bit, and another neighborhood is blacked out for a bit. So they try to get like each neighborhood a few hours of electricity per day, right? Generating capacity for the whole city, right? They call that, that's what they do, that's what they call food. And so I have this quote from an article in the New York Times about these families in Kinshasa where the parents eat on one day and the kids eat the next day, and then the other way around. This is in a country with the richest natural resources in the world, and our corporations are just raping this country, pillaging it, brutally, and these people are starving at their own country. I mean, I always think one just just not enough guillotines.
That's a good one.
So appalling, so disgusting. Anyway, so we need to stop ripping off the South and we need to reprioritize, reorganize, restructure production to build the products that we do need to be as durable, rebuildable, recyclable, as shareable as possible, steer things into resources into things society needs, like renewable energy or farming, and so on. And so like we don't need, like I write about in China, the Chinese didn't need an olive. healthiest and the least polluting mode of transportation with the available technology we have at this stage in our new development for urban environments in the world. Totally simple. The Chinese could have upgraded their bicycles. They were kind of corporate, you know, the flying chickens and whatnot. And the buses were like 1840s versions, you know, kilometers. And the trains were, first class trains were pretty okay in China in the 1980s. Hard to see what was, you know, second class and move up. But if they had just upgraded those and built some subways, which they have recently done, and they really needed to. But instead, in the 1980s and 90s, they decided they were going to pursue a capitalist strategy of commodification and build a consumer society. And they've really been pushing that. And so they created what they call pillar industries, the automobile industry being one. And now they're trying to build airplane industry, which is just completely insane. They have no need to do this. This is just completely unnecessary. I'm not saying that people here should have automobiles, but no, the Chinese should not have automobiles. I'm not saying that at all. We need to get out of our automobiles here and get that on bus. Here, so that we'll have a healthier environment too. I came to this here, it's really lovely. Look over the, I'm standing in that park. Roger, where did you take me? Some park, I don't know the name of it. Looking out, I can see the Belgian brown smog over the horizon there. And it's from the car. And beautiful British monkey that, if we consolidated our cities and we had better public transportation, we wouldn't even have to completely abolish cars. I'm not going back to the Stone Age, but we just don't need to use them as much as we do now, or have as many, or have an industry that replaces them all the time. You know, I would argue that the most environmental automobiles in the world today are not those Toyota Priuses. The most environmental automobiles in the world today are those old Fords and Oldsmobiles and whatnot that are cruising around the streets as a family. Now, why would I say that? They get terrible mileage, right? They actually don't get worse mileage than the current American behemoths, like American, these things get like 9 miles per gallon. You know, American, those cars were twice the weight of cars of the land yachts, like in America in the 1950s, the Cadillac and Chrysler. Gigantic. I live in New York City, they're just all over the place. I mean, I see like little ladies getting into these humongous Cadillac Escalades. Why do you need to do this? Lady next door to me. Why do you do this? You know, where do you go if you get this humongous thing? Anyway, why do I say that? I say that because you see, there was a study which I cited in one of my papers that said that it's really interesting about automobiles that the bulk of the pollution coming from automobiles, the life cycle study, get the whole life cycle of the automobile. The bulk of the pollution from automobiles, 60% of it, comes from the manufacture of the automobile before it ever leaves the showroom. All the minerals that go into it, the steel, the aluminum, the glass, the oil, the plastic, the rubber, all the raw materials that go into the production of the car, and all the manufacturing process needs to produce that. That produces many, many kinds of and much more pollution than will ever come out of the tailpipe of the car on your average 10-year car lifespan. And then another 10% is produced in the destruction of the car when it's towed away to the junkyard and smashed, right? That's another 10%. Only 30% of the pollution from the car comes out of the tailpipe. So even if you got rid of all of those gasoline-powered cars and replace them with millions of new electric cars, and there are a whole bunch of problems with electric cars. I think electric cars are even more polluting. That would only save 30% of the pollution. need to devise a rational means to approaches to waste and toxics. I talked about that in my Beyond World article. And we need, lastly, we need guaranteed employment at equal pay for workers displaced by closing. Because if you're going to shut down, or retrench industries, then you have to provide those workers, those skilled people. You know, you can't say to people, your industry, sorry, but your industry is destroying the world. We have to close your industry. You have to go out to starve. I mean, you know, they're not going to want to hear that. It's not fair to them, and they need to work like we need to work. So you have to have a society that provides jobs for people doing something else. There are many other things we need to do in this society. We need health care, American society, because we don't have luxuries like health care, at least nothing anybody can afford. But we need health care, we need better schools, we need resources put into all kinds of things. Environmental remediation, quality housing for people, many things could be made less, public transportation, could be made in less polluting ways. We need all of those. So there's plenty of work for people to do. But a society has to provide jobs for people. It's not enough to just give them like an unemployment check and a few weeks training and tell your coal miners that, go learn to be a computer shop. That's not going to do. You won't get their support for the kind of radical changes we need to make to save the planet. Okay, so, well, if that's what we have to do to save the planet, then what kind of society do we have to have to do that? I'm going to argue that we need to basically nationalize most of these big industries in large. For some of them, like the oil companies, we just basically need to shut them down. ExxonMobil, we don't shut down every oil company, but much of them, maybe most of them, really. If Hanson's right, and I don't think the World Bank thinks he's right, all the people, if Hanson's right, if we do need to really dramatically get off fossil fuels, then we have to stop producing it, which means we have to make the companies that are producing it stop producing it. That's close it down. So, the only way to do that is to nationalize them or socialize them. And then if you can do that, of course, you have to get people jobs. So I don't see any alternative to nationalize Athabasca or Nixon or TransCanada and close them down. So society would have to do that. I don't see any need, though, having said that, I don't see any need to nationalize family farms and mom-and-pop restaurants and farmers markets and artisans and groceries and bakeries and local repair shops and workers' co-ops and the like. Small businesses are not destroying the world. But big corporations are destroying the world. They're out of control. They're too big. They have too big a scale, too big a technology. They have the capacity. ExxonMobil, this company has the capacity to melt the polar ice caps. It's a huge, I think it's a great slide. I have this huge picture of a fishing net. I should have saved it. I haven't been taken. A gigantic fishing net. I'll just describe it. It's a huge fishing net. And this is a while ago, 1993. And it has a picture. It shows this, it's the New York Times picture. It shows this big fishing net shaped like this, right? And it has these dozens of things in the net. A dozen big things in the net. But the big things are not fish. They're 747s. There's like a dozen of them in the maw of this fishing net. Like 12 747s can be stacked in the opening of this fishing net, which just shows you the scale of the rapine of the oceans. Is it any wonder there's no fish left in the ocean? I mean, and this is a photograph from 1993. The fishing nets are much bigger today, just miles wide and huge. I mean, what fish has a chance out there? So we have to stop that. Those big corporations are way out of control. We have to nationalize them. We have to close them down. We have to reprioritize. We don't have to shut down everything, but we have to turn the automakers into making windmills or solar panels or something society needs, but is not destroying the planet. And we have to rationally see what society really needs, which is not designed-in obsolescent stuff to be thrown away next year and replaced, but things that are durable and can last us for years or decades, even generations, We have to build for the future so that we can husband, protect resources for our children. crack the planet work our way off fossil fuels, drench the world's farms with toxic pesticides, or return to organic farming, public transportation, or private cars as the mainstay. Let's put these questions up for a vote. Shouldn't everyone have a say in decisions that affect them all? Isn't that the essential idea of democracy?
Can you change your slide? We're still looking at the old one then.
Do I have another slide?
Do you not have a slide for your solution?
Oh, no, I should. I don't. No, I'm sorry. What's my next slide? No, it's not. I don't have a slide for it, but I should. This stuff is in my papers. I'm just repeating what's in my papers. You can get it right out the door. You don't have to take things all over. The point is that these questions should be put up for a vote. Isn't that the idea of democracy? Well, actually, no. Because the idea of capitalist democracy is that the economy is off the table. That's a completely private decision of private investors and owners and CEOs. That's not your decision. Your decision is to go vote for some bozo every 2 years or 4 years who represents them. And you can choose for this set of bozos or that set of bozos, but they all represent the same corporate interests, and they will screw you no matter what. So that's what democracy is in capitalism. But the problem is that the economy does need to be put up for a vote. We need to be able to make these decisions. Corporate boards, like in Adam Smith Day, it didn't so much matter that what the capitalists made the decisions about their industries and so forth, because they were tiny little industries. They didn't have much impact, so who cares? Although it mattered for like slaves and things like people like that. Capitalism was not benign in the 18th century, I'm sure, but for the global environment, it didn't have much impact. But today it matters because you have huge decisions that affect all of us and thousands of other species, even the fate of life on the planet. These are still private decisions made by corporate boards on behalf of self-interested investors. Polls show, for example, that 80% of Americans oppose GMO foods. But Americans don't get to vote on whether we get GMOs in our food. In fact, we don't even get to vote on whether we know that there are GMOs in our food. Well, why not? Corporate boards vote, the boards vote to put GMOs in our food. And they vote to put all kinds of toxic chemicals in our food. But we're the ones that end up consuming it. So why don't we get to vote on these decisions? Why don't we don't have to be experts to make such decisions. Corporate boards aren't composed of experts. George Bush was on a corporate board before he became president. He didn't have to know anything about either one of those jobs. He was a rich guy, so he got on the board. The corporate boards are made up of big shareholders, big investors. They're not experts. They hire experts to to figure out how to implement the decisions they make. So my question is, why can't we hire experts to figure out what decision we want to make about the economy? Corporations have no crystal ball or super expertise. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to establish democratic institutions in society to plan and manage our social economy. We'd have to have planning boards at local levels, regional levels, national, continental, international levels. These would have to include whole communities, consumers, farmers, workers, everyone, not just technicians, not just any single group. We have computers. Larry Schmidt said that by 2020 the whole world will be on a computer. So why couldn't we register these kinds of votes instantaneously? Why can't we have a free discussion, debates about positions pro and con, for cars, against cars, have a discussion and have a vote on these things. Obviously, many issues can be decided at local levels. Others, like closing down the coal industry or repurposing the auto industry, require larger scale planning. Global warming, ocean acidification, deforestation, these require extensive international cooperation and really affect global planning. That's manageable, and we have the UN Climate Convention, which meets annually, as I mentioned, and is supposed to be charged with regulating global greenhouse gas emissions, but it doesn't have any enforcement power. Well, it needs some enforcement power. It needs to be able to say to American auto producers, no, you can't produce which are quite interesting because even though public utilities are both a mix of publicly owned and privately owned, mostly privately owned, nonetheless, the actual regulating process of deciding how much electricity is produced, how much water, and these other kinds of utilities get built in the United States is actually done through public utilities, which are entirely astonishingly democratic and open. And anybody can go to these meetings and participate and get all the records and everything. It's a kind of it's a big loophole they left open, you know. but it exists. It's very interesting. Look at Greg Palast's book, P-A-L-A-S-T. He's a very good journalist. A study of public relations called Democracy. I forget the title. Democracy. It's a footnote in my book, but there's more than a footnote. There's a couple pages discussion of it. It's a very good example of what I would call kind of a proto-socialism. And I don't see any reason why that model couldn't be extended to much of the industrial structure in America. Okay. But I was just going to say, though, that, you know, when scientists say, like when James Hampton and other scientists say that we need to have, we need to hold CO2 emissions to 350 parts per million over the planet, isn't that in effect calling for essentially kind of a one world government on that, you know, like global responsibility, taking responsibility for the planet? That's kind of what we have to do. That's the Anthropocene part. You know, we do need to do that. Okay? Fifth point. Democracy can only work in the context of rough socioeconomic equality. When, in the midst of the Great Depression, the great Supreme Court Justice, Louis Brandeis, he was called the people's jurist, Louis Brandeis said, we can either have democracy in this country, or we can have great wealth concentrated in the hands of a few. But we can't have both. He was more right than he thought, than he knew. Today we have by far the greatest concentration of wealth in history. So it's hardly surprising that we have the weakest and most corrupt democratic governments since the Gilded Age. If we want democracy, we would have to abolish the great wealth concentrated in the hands of the few. That means abolishing not just private property and the major means of production, but also extremes of income, exorbitant salaries, great property, and inheritance. Because at the end of the day, the only way to prevent corruption in democracy is to make it impossible for people to materially gain by being corrupt, which means by creating a society with neither rich nor poor, a society of basic economic equality in which we're kind of all in the middle economically. And so there's no way to get rich. I think that's the only answer. I think in my view, there's an intrinsic connection between planning and democracy and equality. I just don't think you can have a true democracy without equality. I mean, look at our country. Look at this country. You know, but look at our country. It's just ghastly. So, does that mean we're all going to have to dress in blue Mao suits and dine in communal mess halls? I don't think so. Lots of studies. Wilkinson and Pickett, I'll mention this book, The Spirit Level, very good book. The UK, Britain's New Economics Foundation, and others have shown that even in capitalist societies like Finland and some other places, people are happier. Where life is better, there's less crime and violence, fewer mental health problems in societies that are more equal, where income differences are small, where concentrated wealth is limited or non-existent. Gandhi was right in saying that there's more than enough wealth for man's needs, but there's never enough for some men's greed. And we don't have 5 planets to provide all the resources for every person on Earth to live like the consumer's lifestyle, like the American one or the Chinese think they want. But we have more than enough to provide every human being on the planet with safe water and sanitation, quality food, quality housing, great public education and transportation, great health care, all the authentic necessities that we really need. Does this mean sacrifice and austerity? Well, if that's George Monbiot says, well, you know, that means we have to give up jetting off to Cancun and so forth on vacations, you know. But, you know, when I was growing up in Seattle, we didn't think about jetting off on vacations to Cancun, you know. We went camping, and we went to the coast, and the Olympic Peninsula. I came to Victoria. And when I was a kid, we took the ferry up to Victoria when I was a teenager. I mean, we had a wonderful life. And, you know, my parents were just working class think, on the contrary, I would view ecosocialism as a liberation from the treadmill of consumerism and the mindless, appalling, alienating jobs that we have in society, which is manufacturers or sellers of widgets and crackers of this corporation, slave corporation. I think if we could get rid of this disgusting capitalist society, we could free ourselves from the toil of all this mindless waste and greed and live authentic lives where we can spend our time sitting around in the cafes and having more time off and have more time to make love and go on vacations and, you know, all these things, you know, and live a real life, live, you know, live. So we need to redefine the meaning of life, of a standard of living, to connote a way of life that is actually richer while consuming less. I'm quoting Michael Lowy, who was a wonderful eco-socialist. He really summed it up beautifully. Okay, last point. This is completely crazy, utopian, impossible, and never happened. Well, maybe. But what's the alternative? The planetary emergency we face is no joke. The specter of planet-wide ecological collapse and the collapse of civilization in some kind of Blade Runner dystopia is not so hypothetical as it once seemed. Ask the Chinese. China's capitalist miracle has already driven that country off the cliff to headlong ecological collapse and threatens to take down the whole planet. But China's rulers face hundreds of mass protests, many of them violent, around the country every day, and it's all they can do to keep the lid on. As China itself demonstrates, revolutions come and go. Economic systems come and go. Capitalism has had a good 300-year run, but it's past its use-by date. The question is, will humanity stand by and let the world be destroyed to maintain the profit system? That's what would be truly crazy. I just don't think the younger generation sitting in this room is going to let that happen. And here's another younger generation. Are going to be on this people's procession and rally against the pipeline, the Burnaby Coast Salish Turpin. You're going to, for broke. I'm sorry, I can't read it. Join broke as we, can you read this? Expose the expansion of Kinder Morgan Trans pipeline, which comes from the city of Burnaby. Roger Hannett can say something about this in a minute. Okay, so around the world, young and old are struggling against the destruction of nature, against dams, against pollution, against overdevelopment, against the siting of chemical plants and power.